Choose wisely, the ROG Xbox Ally X versus the Lenovo Legion Go 2. Despite both of these being Windows handhelds running a similar chip and offering relatively the exact same performance, they really couldn't be any more different. One gives you more flexibility in how you play it and use it in your day-to-day life, whereas the other focuses purely on ergonomics with its form factor. One is vastly more expensive, potentially for good reason, and the other tries to make your experience as seamless as it can be with the new Xbox full screen mode. Although, spoiler alert, this can actually be installed on the Legion Go 2. Today, I'm going to help you decide between these two handheld devices and let you know which one might just be the best fit for you. Before we get into it though, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. I just want to say thank you guys so much for the support. We are getting closer to 100,000 subscribers that I could have ever really imagined, and it'd be really cool to hopefully one day put a plaque on that wall. So if you want to be a part of the group of people that's helped with that, it'd mean a lot. Anyways, I'm gonna start off with things that you'd notice off the bat, like the pricing and specs, before I give you any real personal opinion. So the ROG Xbox Ally X cost about $1,000. It has a 7-inch 1080p 120Hz display, and it's using AMD's Ryzen AI Z2 Extreme chip with 24 gigs of RAM, and it also comes with a 1TB SSD. The Legion Go 2, on the other hand, however, Are you ready for this? Yeah, it's $1,350. It's technically using a different chip. It's not the AI version of the Z2 Extreme, so it's lacking the NPU, but you do get more RAM at 32 gigs, and it has 1 TB of storage as well. And unlike the ROG Xbox Ally X with an LCD display, it has an 8.8-inch 144Hz OLED panel at 1200p. So it's larger, it's higher resolution, it has a higher refresh rate, and overall, it's just a better display technology. But what's more impressive is the fact that despite the Legion Go 2 is OLED, it still has variable refresh rate. And to help with the absurdly expensive price tag, I will say that Lenovo does include a carrying case, as well as some extra nifty things that we'll talk about shortly. Though, let's just straight up be real here. $350 is a massive price disparity between these two devices. That could get you games, a headset, a dock, and so much more to actually fully flesh out the Ally X's experience. Heck, you could even get the case that I'm using right now, which is the kill switch from Dbrand. By the way, thank you Dbrand for sponsoring this video. This is the Dbrand kill switch case for the ROG Xbox Ally X, which for Black Friday today is $45 off. You get a kill switch case, which is the case that I'm using right now, like I said. It has an included kickstand. You can pick from a plethora of different skins just to spice up the look. It comes with some stick grips as well. You get tempered glass screen protectors, and it includes a microfiber cleaning cloth. Now, unfortunately, Dbrand doesn't have a kill switch case for the Legion Go 2 at the moment, but I'm a big fan of how the skins not only look, but cover and protect this brick of a handheld. I pretty much always opt for the Area 51 classified skin, which is what's basically on every device that I'm using right now, but there's so much more to choose from. There's a huge blowout that's happening right now with 20% off of skins as well, and you could even save a lot on something like the grip case, which is what I use for the iPhone 17 Pro Max. Also, with every order, for some reason, you get a pack of playing cards. I mean, they're really high quality. I'm not sure why, but these are really cool. So yeah, if you want some playing cards, I guess, and you want to kit out your Xbox Ally X and the Legion Go 2, go ahead and head to the link in the description down below, and it'll also be in a pinned comment. So thank you Dbrand for sponsoring this video. Now, there's some things the Xbox Ally does that I'd say leap ahead of the Legion Go 2, and it's mostly in terms of comfort. So this is a co-branded product with Xbox, and when you pick it up, you start to understand why. The controller feels almost as if they took an Xbox Series controller, cut it in half, and stuck it on either side of the Xbox Ally X, which I know does look odd in photos and videos. It makes this thing look kind of silly, but when you pick it up, you really start to appreciate this, and it doesn't feel like any other handheld on the market. It's super familiar. You don't need to relearn a controller if you're coming from Xbox. Everything is very reachable, and I'd say the best part of the Ally X's controller is the thumbstick. They're not Hall effect like the Legion Go 2, nor does it have removable metal stems, which are really smooth to use, but they've nailed them. These sticks are tight, there's a lot of spring to them, and when it comes to playing shooters where you need to actually be accurate, in my opinion, they're a lot better than the Legion Go 2s, which can feel pretty loose and floppy. The Ally X is also much lighter. It weighs half a pound less than the Legion Go 2, which means that actually using it in your hands as a handheld is going to be more comfortable. On the flip side though, there are some things that Lenovo's actually done to counter this weight. There's already a kickstand on the back, so you could prop it up onto a table or balance it sit on your leg. The controllers are also removable and they can connect wirelessly using Bluetooth. So if you're using it with the kickstand, you can kind of just kick back and chill. This also means that if you take this thing around and you want to use it alongside a dock to put them on a TV or on a monitor, with the Legion, you don't actually need to take a controller with you. You also don't need to take a mouse. It has a mouse mode. Now, I do think this is pretty cool, but aside from showing you how it works on the channel, I actually haven't touched this since. It's not something that I really enjoy using, but this is the flexibility that I was talking about. With the Ally, unless it's docked and you have like an external controller or something like the kill switch, you're kind of stuck with its form factor. That's not a bad thing. Like, this is the point. It's a handheld. It's supposed to be used like this, but it's just something that's worth mentioning that, you know, there is more ways that you can actually use the Legion Go 2. Though I do think that Asus focusing on the core of this device and what makes it tick has trickled down into other areas, like with the full screen experience. This new way of using Windows is fantastic. It runs better, it's easier to navigate, it feels more console-like than just another Windows handheld, and I don't really find myself needing to go into Windows 11 to do pretty much anything. Your launchers are baked in, your games show up in the Xbox app, and navigating them is super easy. There are pre-made shortcuts on the Ally itself to use it. Now, unless you do some crazy registry editing and stuff like that to get the full screen experience on the Legion Go 2, it comes default with just straight up Windows 11. I will say that Windows on here honestly isn't that bad. Just because it is a larger display and you actually have a touchpad to navigate the mouse, I'd say just save yourself the trouble and wait for official support from Lenovo to include the full screen experience. Because I'll be real, even though I went out of my way to add some keybinds for things like the task switcher or the game bar, sometimes they just straight up don't work and it could be really frustrating. But having the full screen experience does make the Ally stand out. It's way more accessible, where I think straight up Windows 11 on a handheld is something that I never really look forward to. Now, both of these devices have dual USB-C ports. The Allies are right beside each other and the Legion has one on the top as well as on the bottom. They both also have a microSD card slot, which is easier for storage expansion. Both have a 3.5mm headphone jack. Both allow for fingerprints with Windows Hello for easier login, and both have remappable paddles on the back so that you can make special binds for different games. I pretty much always use one for jump and one for slide in Call of Duty. Though because the Legion has removable controllers and one of these is actually a mouse, it's kind of weird. There are these two buttons on the side of the right controller, which are deactivated unless you're in the mouse mode, but it's still really annoying when you're in handheld mode because you're just kind of always pressing them down. And because of this, there's also this third mouse button right here, which again isn't activated unless you're in mouse mode. But now it just gives you this like weird asymmetrical layout where one has one paddle, the left controller has two. This isn't a big deal for me because I do actually just use two, like I said, for jumping and sliding in shooter games. But it's something that kind of like messes with your brain a bit, especially because there's also like this scroll wheel that sometimes I kind of just like bump into when I'm playing. Not that, again, it's activated when it's in handheld mode, but it just seems like it's more finicky. Though all of these things aside, I want to talk to you about the experience. What's it like to play games on these handhelds? What offers more performance, and which one is ultimately maybe more worth it for you? See, this is pretty complicated because there's no real right answer. I've put a lot of time on both the Legion Go 2 and the ROG Xbox Ally X, and I think that I found one that I prefer, but it really only comes down to one singular thing. See, both of these are going to perform relatively the same. The extra RAM in the Legion Go 2 allows for more VRAM to be allocated, which does pretty much just eliminate the difference in resolution. They will perform on average a couple of frames ahead or behind another, given the title, and because they're so similar, the one that I find myself gravitating toward is the Legion Go 2. Yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's cumbersome and it is a little quirky, and it's definitely not perfect despite it being the most expensive. Though what Lenovo's done here, and is ultimately the reason for the price and the size, is that they've managed to cram the best display that I've ever seen in a handheld. 1.8 inches in difference might not seem like a lot, but it is, so I'm sorry if someone told you otherwise, but the Legion Go 2 is also a 16:10 panel, so there is more vertical screen real estate as well. And when it comes to playing games with a lot of HUD elements or just a lot on the screen in general, it's much more readable at a glance. It's not as straining, and it's hands down just much more immersive than the Xbox Ally X. This is a shockingly good display, and if you have a chance to like go see it in person at like a Best Buy or something, I would highly encourage you to, because the second you do, you're going to realize realize why this thing is so interesting. However, that doesn't mean that the 7-inch 16:9 LCD panel on the Xbox Ally X is bad. It's actually a very solid IPS panel. I don't have any issues with ghosting, the brightness is great, though I find myself leaning more toward the Xbox Ally X for indie titles rather than games like Battlefield, where I know I want to see more of the action. Which is ironic because on one hand, this is far more comfortable, it has much better analog sticks, and it's one that I would actually feel comfortable playing on and using for hours. Whereas this is something that I'd feel much more comfortable in playing in like tabletop mode or in the bed resting it on my leg. But I think that just goes to show you that these are basically just computers with a screen and some controllers. So if 1/3 of that equation, which is the one that you're going to be staring at, is really good, it can kind of outweigh some of the not so great things about it. However, I do prefer the speakers on the Ally. If you're like me and you're not someone that really needs to use or likes to use headphones that much, these are insanely good. They're loud, they're punchy, and they're tuned really well for games. The Legions are top firing, which immediately just makes them worse. They're not as loud and they're not as clear either, but because they're firing away from you, it's not as immersive as the Allies. And because both of these have the same chip, which can turbo pretty high, especially when plugged in, you do get some fan noise. They're both pretty tame. The Legion does get a little bit louder, it sounds a little whinier. And again, because the speakers fire away from you, it's not actually as easy to hide this as it is with the Ally. Though, because the controllers on the Legion technically aren't even a part of the chassis, you don't actually feel any heat generated by this device, which I do really like. Not that the Ally gets hot by any means, but you can feel it warming up a little bit. And if we're nitpicking here, I think the Ally's D-pad is better. I like the face buttons more. I'm a big fan of how the triggers and bumpers feel. There's a little too much throw on the Legion Go 2s, which can be pretty good for racing games, but it's not actually that great for, say, tap firing in some shooters. You can actually tweak this though in the Lenovo app. Both of these devices have their own custom launchers with thermal management or macros and so on that offer a ton of tweaks, which is really nice to have and is something that I would recommend you just kind of dive into on your own to tweak these to how you like them. But lastly, the thing that I want to mention with these is the battery life. Even though the Legion Go 2 is larger, it's actually using a smaller battery, oddly enough, at only 74 watt hours versus the 80 watt hours on the Xbox Ally X. Though I wouldn't say the battery on one or the other is significantly worse. It's actually kind of just a toss-up. Honestly, it really just comes down to what you're playing. If you play, say, Battlefield, your battery's not going to last as long as if you're playing something like Hollow Knight Silksong. Personally, I don't find myself draining these anyways. If I'm playing a AAA game in bed that's demanding, I'm almost always just keeping it plugged in, which also allows me to use the turbo mode so I get better performance. And the lighter to run titles, I can get up to 5 to 6 hours on both. So I don't really see myself playing 6 hours straight on a handheld anyways. But I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, both of these are really solid handhelds. Do I wish that they were cheaper? Of course, but they aren't, and I'll be real with you, even though there's a lot that I like about the Legion Go, specifically the display, because it really is a game changer, I don't think that I would personally spend $1,350 on a gaming handheld. In Canadian, that's like almost $2,000, and that can get me a pretty solid gaming PC. I know it's not the same. In terms of like the price to performance, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. The ROG Xbox Ally X is a really solid all-around handheld that's done a lot of core things right. And like I said, $1,000 is a lot, but you could use a remainder of this kit to pick up things like some games and accessories and actually be able to enjoy it. So let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of these handhelds. Let me know if you've picked one up, if you're thinking about picking one up, and ultimately if you think these prices are starting to get outrageous, because I'm kind of down to have this conversation in the comments. Anyways, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. Thank you guys so much for watching. And before you leave, if you can consider dropping a turtle emoji down below, I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.